I'm in the business now for 10 years. 8 years we've run a restaurant and still successful, still growing, still full house on the weekends. But there's certain magic to it, and that is actually to stay competitive. But how can other Singaporeans in other service sectors stay competitive as well?
First, to provide the best possible foundation, I think through education. Increasingly, we believe that education has to be lifelong because the world is changing so fast. Even within your own sectors, you find things are moving on and you need to reskill yourselves, re-equip yourself with those new skill sets.
It's very difficult,
It's very difficult, but I think we are able to do that in terms of organizing ourselves, providing subsidies, both for individuals, supporting companies so that you send your workers there. They are skilled and they can continue to be relevant. Because the moment you become irrelevant, I think you have challenges finding jobs. You will also find, especially with technology coming in, some sectors will begin to vanish. You will begin to go abroad because it makes a lot more sense to operate there. What happens to the people who are then left here if you don't reskill and re-equip yourself to move to another sector? Companies will need to transform. It's not just technology. You operate in Japan, where obviously they also have limited access to foreign manpower. But with that small workforce, how do you re-engineer your work process so that that individual who is here serving that dish, he turns around, he can multitask within that same space? And that's something that companies also need to figure out how best to do. Spring with PIC, PIC Plus, IDA schemes, we will support as best as we can for companies to transform. And when they do well, they ultimately create the opportunities for Singaporeans as well.
To be very honest, when people say you're doing well, it means that your restaurant is full.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of factors. Rental is extremely high. I just shared with you as well that my rent, which in our future restaurant in Tokyo, in a very prime area, is 1/3 the price of what I'm paying in Orchard Road. It is incredible. Manpower, the wages are getting higher and higher. And because we're in a creative business, and I need to stay competitive over the 8 years, we have to consistently increase their wages as well. But the people with me, they stay. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years is very quite unheard of. But with this increasing wages and the stagnated price point of pastry, no one will pay more than $10 for a slice of cake. It's not balanced at all. It's extremely difficult. On the forefront, we all look very successful. But at the back end, there's a lot of these factors that we need to stay competitive. So by being competitive means now I'm learning, how to make coffee. So I'm actually learning another skill on top of being a pastry chef in Singapore. Even my guys are picking up new skills. The main issue as well is how can Singaporeans survive through this, but yet stay extremely competitive in what we're facing right now?
Singaporeans are not lazy, but I think the issue here is how do you get more out of them when at the same time businesses are growing and there's not enough people? So we talk about all these training courses. The reality is on the ground, most of the companies I know, most of the hotels, they don't dare to send the Singaporean staff training because there's not enough staff as it is. You send staff for training course, you're even more short of staff. So, it's very difficult to upgrade a lot of the core skills at the same time as you're juggling with a massive manpower crunch.
I have a question. Despite all these opportunities, there's sort of persistent noises that come from PMETs who can't find jobs and claim they have been discriminated against. Do you think Singaporeans are considered fairly? I was talking to someone of the younger generation who's in the pharmaceutical industry, and she mentioned a very well-known pharmaceutical giant that all the local pharmacists were trying to avoid going to because they perceived there was a ceiling, and that in this particular company, at the top level, they employ people from its country of origin. They knew that they would not get any further.
Many of these companies are global in nature, so they service the world, and you do need people with the different exposures. One of the things that we find, many Singaporeans are not so keen to be posted abroad because Singapore is fairly comfortable. Those of them with children, they are worried about education. So when you're not deployed abroad, you don't have that expertise. It affects your deployability and possibly promotion. But it's frightfully difficult to prove. Discrimination is not just nationality, it's in a lot of different forms. But what we do is this, we track numbers. We recognize that sometimes it's just sheer numbers, because of the volume that you create, like the financial industry. You need people with particular skill sets that we may not have as many people exposed to or being trained in that particular area. So the pipeline in terms of developing our people is critical. For example, MAS works with the finance industry. Last year alone, several billions of dollars put in to help in terms of looking at upgrading, development, skill sets, so that young Singaporeans moving up will be equipped to take on those jobs. Actually, pharmaceuticals, you do see a fair number of senior positions being held by Singaporeans who used to work their way up.
I wouldn't say it's common, but
but it's growing.
specific, yeah.
And I think you're beginning to see that in other industries where individuals feel that there are discriminatory practices. I think they should flag it up. We will go in and take a look.
Any of you personally come across any discriminatory hiring practices, and do you think it's widespread?
When a foreigner comes into the workforce, the locals feel slightly threatened. I think it's inevitable. It also creates competition, which is very healthy. And I allow this integration to happen in my company. This is important. I mean, if you want to succeed and you want to be better than other people overseas, you gotta be shaken up a bit. I mean, we are very comfortable. I can be very comfortable and I can just make one cake for the next 8 years and stay the same. But we can't because we have a lot of competition everywhere around us.
I know of no Singaporean company that would be discriminatory in its hiring practices except to favor Singaporeans. I am discriminatory in hiring Singaporeans. Simply because, look, a ready workforce, well adapted, you can't beat that. It's only if you really can't hire the Singaporeans that you would think of a foreigner. It costs me much more to hire a foreigner. Why would I do that? It's economic suicide. What a lot of Singaporeans forget is that foreigners bring a huge amount of vibrancy to our country. Economy as sophisticated as Singapore's, can you say that you're only going to use Singaporeans? Every foreigner that comes to Singapore, there will be 5 or 6 jobs hired for Singaporeans.
As a business owner, you want to hire Singaporeans, and it's only when your hand is forced and you really know Singaporeans apply for the job that you then want to hire a foreigner, and that doesn't work because the quota doesn't work for you, and then you're thinking, what do I do now? No discrimination against Singaporeans. It's always pro-Singapore. Yeah, whether they're older, whether they're housewives who want to work part-time, you want to integrate all of them because you want to have your team to be as Singaporean as possible.
Healthcare is a very knowledge-intensive kind of business that we are in. And we have doctors who come from different places. Even local, they are trained in different places as well. And for us, when we interact with one another, let's say we are discussing a patient, a particular case, and discussing how we treat the patients and whether it's the right thing that we have done for the patient. We focus on trying to get the patient well, doing the right thing for the patient. Frankly, we don't care where you come from, what color you are, even your accent that you use. Because our focus is on the common thing that we are trying to do, take care of the patient. And you can't help but admire people because of their knowledge, because your opinion is so sound that the rest of us are learning. And maybe sometimes our jaw just drop and say, yeah, that was a nice insight, we haven't thought about that.
Seems like foreigners are occupying the top positions in banking, finance, and IT. Is this because we lack talent, or numbers, or both?
Our local workforce is small, so one of it is numbers. We do have increasingly more Singaporeans holding various positions. UBS, for example, I know have a number of Singaporeans that are heading some of the key jobs, for example, in terms of wealth management, not just for Singapore, for Southeast Asia and the Asia-Pacific region. And you have some of these examples, not just finance, but elsewhere as well. Another one, skill sets. I know of friends who are in particular sectors, and they are Singaporeans. They want to hire Singaporeans, but it's quite a unique area. You don't have many Singaporeans who are trained in those areas. So we need to also develop a pipeline. The last one really is, would there be some level of people being more comfortable with hiring someone that they're familiar with? They know someone from school, someone they worked with before, who they trust. So it's a lot of it is about relationships. What we want to make sure is that the playing field is level. So Singaporeans have access to those jobs. That's where the fair consideration framework comes in. If you want to apply for an employment pass, then I expect you to put it on the jobs bank so at least Singaporeans know that those jobs are available and they can apply for it. If I can get Singaporean, and I think as many of them shared, it's actually cheaper in some ways because you don't have to add on a lot of the other expenses that comes with hiring someone from abroad. And I think many people also know that when you have crisis, because foreign workforce comes and goes, it's not permanent workforce, you need a strong, stable core. Whether for local companies or even multinational companies, actually it's important to have that. Anecdotally, you also begin to see foreign students who are studying here, who have to continue working here, and they're coming and saying that, but I can't get jobs because a lot of these companies are saying that they want to hire Singaporeans. I had one case that came to see me at a Meet the People session, which was quite interesting because it was a lady who's a Singaporean working in a particular bank. The husband works in the UK in a same bank, so she wants him to come over. And when she spoke to her HR, they said that they were looking for Singaporeans, and she had problems getting her husband over to the same bank because it meant that companies were beginning to be a bit more deliberate. But we need to be very careful with this because the moment you go to a position where Singaporeans only, I'm worried that you end up hurting the very Singaporeans that you want to protect.